Alright, so this is going to be part 4 to what if Asta had time magic. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. Right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so in the last part we had just gotten done with the Black Bulls getting to the Sea Temple and Asta and the rest of the Black Bulls fighting with Fauna and unfortunately ending her life, depending on how you see it. Now, I know last episode or last part was kind of dark compared to my other what ifs with the inclusion of a lot of detail relating to death, I suppose. But with this series, I wanted it to be a bit more, I guess, serious because of the type of magic that Asta has and the lethality of it, if that makes sense. So this is a lot different than the other ones, where it includes a lot of the villain's deaths, just because of the difference in power, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know how much I'm gonna go with it in terms of that dark theme, but yeah, if you guys like it, you guys can tell me down below. And yeah, so make sure you give this video a like to make sure that this series keeps going, and it lets me know how you feel about the series in general. So with that being said, let's actually get into the video. So we would start off sometime after the Sea Temple arc, where Julius is essentially congratulating the Black Bulls, especially Asta, for what they had done. Now Asta at this point is kind of burned on his arms and his chest because of the fight with Fauna. Now normally he could just use time magic to heal or heal by himself over time, but these burns aren't going away, but they don't know why just yet. And I'll explain it as we get into it a little bit later on, but you guys probably know what I'm gonna go with this. Anyways, as they're talking, Marx actually interrupts and tells Julius that there is a siege going on at one of their border towns. This is where the 8 Shining Generals have come to take over and start war with the Clover Kingdom. But not to worry, the Golden Dawn is there. With this, both Asta and Charmy actually wants to go to help. Charmy because she wants to meet up with Yuno, and Asta because he wants to save people. So Yami does say okay, since Asta isn't as injured as he was in canon. So right now Asta just has bandages wrapping over his arms, fingers, and a little bit of his chest. Using Finral's portals, they're actually able to get there fast. Here, because Asta is injured, they're just gonna have the Black Bulls work with evacuating the city, so that's what they do. Here, Asta will see Yuno fight one of the 8 Shining Generals and win. Here he gets a little jealous, but doesn't really have anything behind it really. It's just a faint feeling. After that, he continues saving people around him, as it's a lot easier since he could use his hands, although he does get a lot of pain from doing this because he's burned after all. And I would say it very much hurts to move, but Asta fights the pain and saves those that need saving. A little bit later, this is where they would meet up with Finral's younger brother, that being Longris. Longris then starts to berate the Black Bulls on how they look, with Asta being all in bandages and Charmy looking like she's a kid. He starts to laugh as something happens behind him. A general comes from behind, and in his magic are a bunch of civilians. Now this was a general that Longris was fighting before, and he thought he had taken him out, but that wasn't the case. This is Yagos, and he has mucus magic. He essentially has all these people trapped within a kind of blob with him in it, and they can't really hurt him, because if he does so, he could just block with just the civilians. So Longris decides that it's worth the risk anyways and tries to attack despite there being innocent people there. But Asta, using his quick speed, is actually able to get in front of Longris, push him out of the way, and then trap the mage within a chronostasis dome. This essentially shuts off the magic all around him, and the people are freed. Longris, seeing this, is a little bit mad that he couldn't predict Asta from doing this because he was just so fast. Not only that, but he feels a little bit insecure from this, that they were able to do it not only single-handedly, but even better than what he did before, because the general is down for the count. He's not going to be able to escape this, while Longris had some trouble with him. So we're just going to skip this entire fight with both Yuno, the Shining Generals, and everything at this battle, because it's going to be the same as in canon, so there's no use in bringing it up. So we would go back to the royal capital, and this is where Asta gets treated for his wounds, but something else happens. The doctor that's there tells him that, well, his wounds aren't getting healed, his magic is not affecting it, and that's because it was some sort of curse magic, or something to that effect, something similar. Not exactly curse magic, but it is very similar. So what happened was, the way that Fauna's attacks work was it essentially burned to the soul. And because it's an injury directly to the soul, it's eternal, and therefore magic that has to do with time can't really work on it. Not only that, because it's attached to the soul, regular means of healing aren't gonna work. So although Asta can function normally to a certain extent, he is burned and has these burns for basically the rest of his life, as there's nothing really to save him at this point that he knows. And because of that, he is limited. His time magic can't work on it, and the doctor's healing magic can't either. So he goes back to the Black Bull's hideout, and where they celebrate their victory at the Sea Temple. Here, Asta is having somewhat of a good time as he's around his friends and what he considers family. He doesn't let the small pains bother him. He knows that he can never be to his full potential as he is now. The pains that he has, he tries to just live on, but eventually the pains do catch up to him. As he's trying to keep this face, the stress of the entire situation and all this is just getting to him, both physically and mentally. He goes off saying that he's going to go to bed early. He finds a secluded place in the woods to just talk to his spirit Kronos. Everyone's a bit confused on why Asta would leave, since he's always had a lot of energy, but Finral knows, and because he was essentially eavesdropping, he knows exactly what the doctors had told him. He tells the rest of the Black Bulls what happened, and obviously they all feel sorry and bad for him because Asta was the one who did that sacrifice to save their lives. Finral especially would feel super terrible because for the majority of the fight he was just hiding, and it's true he did come in clutch at the end, but for the majority of the fight he wasn't doing anything, unlike in canon where he was a essential part from the beginning, at least when Asta came into the picture. Getting back to Asta and Kronos, they'd be sitting on a rock, and as they're just discussing what's happening, a few of the Black Bull members would see Asta and kind of see what he's talking about. They would hide behind bushes and trees to see how Asta is reacting to the entire situation. Asta would start talking to Kronos about his burns and everything he's done. Kronos would then say, "What do you plan on doing after this?" And Asta just says, "Well, the only thing I can really do is go forward. Just like my magic, I had to keep pushing forward for the sake of my dreams and the sake for my squad." It's kind of funny, you know? It's almost like it's a punishment for my deeds. I took someone's life and, well, Asta doesn't really finish. He just looks into the sky and ponders on what he's done over these past few months, questioning whether he did the right thing, ending those two's lives. Kronos then tries to console Asta. He says, "As the spirit of time, I've seen many and many deaths, countless even, but I understand what you're going through. In the beginning, the first primordial creatures to walk, I saw them and imagined how their lives must be. I had witnessed the first death, It wasn't easy. To see a mortal creature wither and perish from the inevitable time was heartbreaking. Those creatures that have lived their lives to raise their offspring, dedicated their entire lives to that. The point is, although it may sound insensitive, you need those to die so that others can live. And the same applies to your situation. Whether you give up your life or you take the lives of others, it only means that whatever you care about will continue living. And with a world with such little time for you creatures, or should I say humans, it's the best thing you could do. If you didn't end Veto's life, both you and your captain would have died. And who knows, maybe the capital or the country as a whole may have fallen. You help secure that future for yourself and for those you care about. And same goes with ending the life of Fauna. One day in the future, despite what you are now, you will become stronger than anyone else. So keep on to that feeling that you have now, because that will keep your conscience intact. Even myself is guilty to that. The two continue talking as Asta changes his bandages to new ones, as they've gotten pretty old since then. As he unwraps his hand, you could see the burns all across and how much pain Asta's in, but he grits his teeth as a tear rolls down his cheek. With this, everyone tries to find a way to help Asta. Now, it would pretty much be the same as in canon, with Vanessa going to the Witch's Forest to discuss with the Witch Queen on how to dispel something like this, and the rest would go off on their own way, with Magna and Luck going to the dungeon and Gordon trying to go back to his family to see if he could find a way to reverse it. Not only that, but Noelle would go and try to find this black market merchant that she bought a lot of stuff from, including the wand that helps her with her magic, seeing if she can help in some way. If you know what I'm talking about, you obviously know this is the wife to Franzo Kruger, that being Asta's master, with her name being Dominate. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Anyways, I won't go over this interaction because it's pretty much how it is in canon and nothing really changes because Asta isn't here. But the basic gist of what happens in this meeting is Dominate basically gets the idea of going to the Witch's Forest, as she is the only one who could really help Asta, that being the Witch Queen. And with that being discussed, they go back to the Black Bull's hideout to pick up Asta and go on their way to the Witch Queen's forest. So, just like in canon, they would sneak into the forest, obviously getting caught and eventually crashing into the main building in where the Witch Queen is basically over Vanessa, pinning her down. This is where their conversation would start. Asta would scream out, "What are you doing to her?" as he would rush in trying to get her off of Vanessa. Now, Asta was a bit faster than what the Witch Queen had expected, but was still able to stop him using crows. He would try to use his magic, but as he would move his arm, it would hurt, slightly slowing him down, and him getting caught by the crows. With him incapacitated right now, this is where the Witch Queen would say, "You seem to have a lot of magic, but you're broken. Those burns, they seem to have worsened." Then Asta would say, "That might be true, but I'm still gonna save Vanessa." The Witch Queen would then say, "Don't get in the middle of family matters. She offered herself to me so I could fix your burns." The Witch Queen then gets off of Vanessa and lets Asta out of the birds surrounding him. This is when she realized there are other invaders, this being the Midnight Sun and the Diamond Kingdom. On the Diamond Kingdom side, you have Mars as well as Ladros leading the charge. And on the Midnight Sun's point of view, it's Rhya, the disloyal. But something's off about him. He is on top of the Fire Spirit Salamander's back, but it's a dragon. Now, this seems almost impossible, but if you guys know, he has copy magic, and therefore he can copy spirits as he did it later on in the Elf arc in canon. Rhya starts talking to himself, trying to hype himself up, but then starts to fall back on memories from the past. He then says the following: Veto, Fauna, I wish you would have been here. It would have been great to siege the forest with you guys. He then starts to slowly laugh as the laughter turns quiet and he slowly starts to cry, remembering his fallen comrades. This pushes him to greater heights and he furthers the charge. So as the two different armies march forward, Asta and his group meets up with the Midnight Sun first, while Fanzel and the other witches meet up with the Diamond Kingdom. So Asta, Noelle, Finral, and Vanessa would deal with a lot of the Midnight Sun that are in front of them. Eventually, this is where both Rhya and Asta would meet up for the second time. But this time, it's no laughing matter. Rhya is serious. After losing two comrades, two friends, he is devastated. And he knows Asta's the one who did it. Rhya takes the fire spirit and he lands onto the ground, looking at Asta from a distance. He walks slowly closer to Asta and he says, "So you're the human who did it. You're the one who killed them. All you humans do is just take from us. Just take and take and take. This may be a war, but you started it. Before Fauna died, she gave me her grimoire. She told me that if for some reason she didn't make it back, she wanted me to copy her spirit dive and her spirit magic. I almost rejected the idea, thinking that how can someone like Fauna die? But I guess I was wrong. And it's a good thing I copied down those spells." As he's saying this, he's basically in front of Asta, both of them looking at each other. And in an instant, Rhya does spirit dive right in front of Asta. This causes the bandages that he had on to burn, revealing that he was healed by the Witch Queen. Rhya looked shocked a little, but then quickly gets calm again, trying not to react. And Asta tells him, "I don't want to do this. I didn't want to kill them, but they gave me no choice." Rhya then says, "This is what I hate about you humans. You always try to stand on your soapbox, yet never follow through with any of your ideals." Asta then says, "Fine, I'll defeat you without killing you. I've grown in the past weeks, and I will stop you here." Rhya then thinks, "I hope he's telling the truth. If I fail, I'm scared to die." Rhya then unlocks his third eye, giving him a boost in power, while Asta does something else. He opens his grimoire, and Kronos comes out. Then, him and Kronos also perform spirit dive. A ray of golden light spews out to where Asta was, and Ladros, Mars, and Fanzel can see the big fight that's gonna happen, but it doesn't distract to what they're doing. But I'm not gonna really discuss it, as it doesn't really matter too much in this situation, as it doesn't really change because Asta's not involved in this at all really, so it really doesn't affect it. So it's gonna be the same as in canon. So going back to both Rhya and Asta, the two charge at each other after getting some distance from each other. Asta summons his weapon that's in this form, that being a scythe. Now this ties back all the way to Greek mythology with Kronos and Kronos having a scythe. If you don't remember, Kronos, god of time, Kronos, the Titan god. Anyways, like I said before in other parts, a lot of times in mythology they get confused for each other or outright thinks that they are the same person, and that's how modern interpretation is now, is that they're the same person. But if you go back, they're technically two different gods. So as the two charge at each other, they collide, with Asta trying to bring down his scythe towards Rhya, as Rhya blocks it with his fire gauntlet, the same weapon that Fauna had. And this is where Rhya looks at Asta and kind of smiles, and he says, "I thought you weren't trying to kill me." and he laughs for a second and then instantly does a sucker punch to Asta's side. Asta then grits from the pain and then in retaliation kicks Rhya in the face. This launches him back a bit, and after a bit he does regain stability and goes for another punch. As he's about to punch Asta, he jumps back. Asta's confused, thinking that why would he do that? Although Asta would have blocked it anyways, he's still confused. But this is all within 2 seconds. After he jumps back, he goes through a portal. The next portal opens up behind Asta, and then the punch comes from behind. This basically hits Asta in the back of the head, launching him towards the ground, crashing. With all the pain and sorrow that Rhya has felt, this lets him evolve his magic even further, letting him use 2 magics at once, because in canon he can only use 1 at a time, having to switch in between different elements. Rhya then puts his hand to his mouth in a fist and starts to blow. This creates a dragon's flame. Asta then gets off the ground and quickly gets his scythe. He starts to turn it and spin it in a counterclockwise motion. This starts to block the fire. Rhya thinks that is he generating that much wind to block it? But no, that isn't happening. Instead, Asta's reversing the flow of the fire, reversing its time, that is. He knows that he can't blow out the flames by just aging it, so he has to reverse it. With this, he starts flying towards Rhya. And as he gets closer to Rhya, Rhya tries to go for another hit to Asta, but Asta's faster. This is where Asta takes the end of his scythe, that being just a handle, and starts hitting Rhya in different points of his body, kind of just jabbing at him or thrusting at him. Now Asta is doing this at incredible speed, so the force that's actually being applied is a lot higher than you would think. But Rhya does adapt to this and grabs onto that handle. He then swings it around and throws Asta towards the ground again. As Asta hits the ground with an even more force than before, as he tries to get up, this is when Rhya basically lands on top of Asta feet first, creating a bigger crater. As he's on top of Asta, this is his chance to actually take him out. So Rhya starts just wailing at Asta as he's on the ground, just punching him again and again. Asta then activates a spell called Overclock. Now this was a fan submitted spell that I got from the comments. Essentially, it accelerates the user depending on the situation. If it's an over situation, then it's only 3 to 10 times, but if it's an emergency, your brain goes into flight or fight mode. This increases the speed dramatically, going from just in the single digits to in the dozens. So when Asta activates it, it being a emergency, not only that but also being a fight rather than flight experience, he goes like this. Everything around him seems to just stop. Asta then pushes Rhya into the air. As Rhya is launched, it seems like he's not even moving. This is because of how fast Asta is going. Everything around him seems to be stopped, but in reality time is still flowing. Asta then puts in a couple quick jabs at Rhya to wear him down. He does this for some time, but in reality it's only a few seconds. When Rhya lands on the ground on his knees, he's pretty much beaten up. Asta then deactivates the spell, and Asta feels really lightheaded with the lack of oxygen going to his brain. With Rhya on the ground, on his knees, almost defeated, he tells Asta, "So you really did it. All the power that I had, all the pain that I went through, you still managed to beat me. I guess it's your win." As Asta's about to console Rhya then quickly turns into a fighting stance, about to punch Asta. "You really think I would let you live after all the things you've done?" And he tries to punch Asta, but then Asta just uses chronostasis to trap him. Asta then powers down and sits on the ground, relief of what he just did, knowing that he didn't have to kill Rhya and that he's able to save everyone in the process. This is where Fonzel and Mars come in. Mars, no longer under the control of the Diamond Kingdom, is happy to see Asta. as well as Fonzel finally beating Ladros. If you don't remember what happened in canon, essentially all the witches combined their powers together and launched an extremely powerful attack towards Ladros. The idea here was if he can absorb mana, there must be a limit, and therefore they're trying to reach that limit. Thinking that Ladros is dead after not being able to sense his magic anymore, they go off to find Asta and the rest of the group, which they do at this point. Coming back around, they all celebrate their win, but then something comes out of the forest. It's Ladros. Ladros then sneakily gets behind the Rhya that's entrapped in the chronostasis. Using his power to absorb magic, he absorbs the binding magic that is around him, that being chronostasis, getting some power from that as well. After he destroys the binding magic, Rhya is about to fall down, but then Ladros hugs him from behind. This lets him absorb the spirit dive magic that is still within Rhya, because right now he's still in spirit dive, just he's pretty weak at this point because of all the fighting. But Ladros is able to absorb it all and therefore becomes Spirit Ladros. But this time he's a lot stronger because the fire spirit itself is a lot stronger than it was in canon due to all the training that Fauna did and basically Rhya just copying it, things like that. Everyone turns around to see the commotion that's happened and they see Ladros and Rhya on the ground. Ladros then starts to speak. He says, "Looks like I missed a pretty big fight, huh?" Alright, so this is where I'm ended. I know there is the fight to go off with this arc and pretty much done. I just want to end it here as it's a pretty good spot too. And I don't want to make this video too long, I guess. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys like it. If you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS so I know you support the channel. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe as that also helps out the channel. With that being said, I gotta shout out the patrons over the Patreon. So if you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan, or you can click the link in the description. That way you can support the channel in other ways and you can get my videos early. You also have a chance of getting a art raffle from me, meaning that you get to choose a drawing for that month. So let's get on with it with the names. In our gold tier, we have Nippy Director, Kenny, Dwayne, Fen. In our platinum tier, we have Lyco. Like I said before, if you want to join them, it'll be linked in the description. And with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video, so yeah.